Hey, do you know where excuse me, do you know where Suilanji is? What? He's what?
He's home.
Yeah, but we don't have a projector. Wait, what about Ebenezer? There's more things. Can we have somebody bring the projector, please? You think we can do that? Excuse me. Can I ask for a favor? We have to do this religiously here, right? Could you pass it around? Sign and pass it around. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I don't know what's happening here. Both the two course representatives are not here. I was expecting a projector, and I sent them a message, right? So somebody has gone to fetch the projector. Hopefully, it will be coming soon. But before the projector comes, I wanted to find out if you people have any comments or concerns about what we've covered so far. We haven't really looked at a lot here, but there's a wealth of materials that I have made available, I think. A total of about, I think, is it 3 notebooks? Well, 1 slide deck, I suppose. I don't think the first one counts. Quite a bit of reading material also. Any thoughts about what we've done so far? Has anybody managed to play around with the data set? Or the 2 data sets? Do you even know what I'm talking about? Are we here for CSC 4792? Yeah? Yes. Yeah, so how is it going? What's the story here as we're waiting for the thing? Any thoughts or comments about what we've done so far? Are we able to read data using, can we read JSON? Data from a JSON file or something using Pandas. Now we will ask questions. I don't know if we're going to probably ask the question here. Write code, here's the CSV file. This is exam, right? Write code for reading this data set and analyzing it in such a way that it produces this sort of output, right? Are you going to be able to do that in the test and the exam? Have you started looking at the data sets? Yeah, this is very strange. I don't know what's going on with the course here, right? What's the difference between a Pandas series and a Pandas data frame? That's a trivial one. I don't think anyone would ask that question, though. Are we able to filter using bitwise operators? Right? Because what I showcased in the last interaction we had, I think, online was this notion that you can use a condition to filter records from a Pandas data frame, but I made mention of the fact that if you want to use multiple conditions, you can use these bitwise operators, right? Bitwise operators. So your AND and your OR, you can leverage negation, for instance. Has anybody managed to look into that? Like if, let's say I want to combine, I want to create a condition that's going to enable me filter females that got more than 50% from our student performance data set. Would we be able to do that? Yeah, I don't know what's happening here with this lot here. Are there any challenges you're experiencing from the materials that I've given so far? The lectures we've had so far? Any issues? Nothing. Okay, or no answer. Okay, let's just wait for this guy to come through, and then we'll quickly go through the notebook, I think, and then transition to Matplotlib. And then afterwards, we can move on to the next lecture series, I suppose. Yeah, so we shall start as soon as he's here. Just a minute. But also, because I'm eager to get my part of the course out of the way, I'm proposing that we have a makeup class on Saturday, right about the same time. Yes, Saturday. Yeah, we missed out on, I think, is it 2 weeks or something of classes, right? I don't understand where this thing is coming from. So I want us to have a makeup session. In fact, I was thinking we attempt to have either a 2-hour-long session, or alternatively what we can, let me finish first, right? I haven't even finished. Alternatively, what we can do is we can have a session, a 1-hour session on Saturday, and then another 1-hour session on Monday, right? So that we cover up. But my thinking is that if we have makeups this weekend and next weekend and probably the other weekend, we'll be able to catch up on the lost time. I think there's about 6 lecture sessions that we were supposed to have, right? Is that fine? I imagine it's fine here. The gentleman who went to collect the projectors, anybody who can give me a call to find out how far he is? The tall gentleman, I don't know what his name is. Not him, somebody else. So Saturday is fine. We can stick, I know the Adventists, I think Sabbath is up to 17 hours or is it 16 hours, so we'll do 18 hours as well Saturday. And then we can do maybe 17 or 18 hours Sunday as well. And then we catch up or something. With what's going on here, it looks like we're going to have quite a bit of catching up, right? Delays with the projector. Thank you, finally. Really appreciate this. I don't know if I'm guessing my laptop will have to be somewhat closer to the projector, right? Thank you very much. Sorry, your name again?
Francis.
Francis, yeah. Thanks. So do this here. Okay. Wow. We have chains here. Chains. don't know if the cable is long enough. It's long enough to go there up there, right? Yeah. It's going to be a lot easier if I just put it here. Okay. So I'm sure it's going to be fine. I'm sure it will work just fine. Is it just like normally you have? Oh, you have something. All right. So as a recap, right? On with it, gentlemen and ladies. So as a recap, so we looked at Python Pandas. We introduced what Python Pandas is all about. We made mention of the fact that this is one of those go-to libraries when you're analyzing data. So one of the questions I was asking is tied to this, right? So this notion that you can filter information. If you have a data set, like our data set here. We know exactly how to pull information from here without a problem. By the way, you can be doing this locally or on Google Golab. But in this particular case, we're just going to assume we are working on this locally. And we realize that we can actually we can ingest information in a broad spectrum of ways, right? So we can read CSV files, we can read JSON files, we can actually read data from a database by specifying an SQL query. We can read an SPSS generated file. I made mention of the fact that primarily what we're going to be doing in the course is assuming that we are reading data from a CSV file, right? Comma separated values file. And one of the first things you do is you have got to import your pandas, right? This is putative, we said. There as PD here is an alias. We know this from our Python. What you can do is you can just import pandas if you want to. But because most of the examples you find on the internet will use the alias PD, we do the same thing here. And once you do this, what you do is you actually, in this particular case, when we read data from this CSV file. Now, the thing about the structure of this CSV file is, again, you can use your bash commands here to look at the structure. It's, in as much as it's a comma separated values file, the separator is not a comma, is it? It's a pipe symbol. And because it's a pipe symbol, we've got to tell Python Pandas that the file from where we are reading this data from has value separated with a pipe symbol. Which is pretty straightforward, right? So what we do is we'll create just a variable, a simple variable. Let me go call this student scores or something like that, right? Or maybe student database, right? I mean, you can choose to use whatever tickles your fancy here. And we're going to use one of these functions, is it? In this particular case, it's a read CSV. Now, if you look up the documentation on the read underbar CSV function, you notice that there are quite a number of parameters that you can feed it. At the bare minimum, in our case, all we're doing is we are feeding it either the absolute path to the file itself or the relative path, right? Because I'm running my interpreter right within here, I'm just going to feed it the name of the file, the CSV file. And then specify the separator, SEP, indicate that this thing is a pipe symbol. And then that's it, right? This variable, I can use the type built-in function to check what sort of data structure I'm working with, and we see that it's actually a pandas data frame. And because it's a pandas data frame, we made mention of the fact that there's so many different things we can do, right? Again, if you use your dir your dir built-in function here, you have a sense of the sort of operations that you can perform on here, right? One of the obvious things that you do by way of inspecting this thing, we said, is you can check the shape, for instance, right? You can check the shape. What the shape shows you is like the structure of the data set. So in this particular case, we have 273 observations or rows, right, in our data set, and a total of 69 columns, right, like attributes associated with the data. If you want to check what sort of attributes you're working with, we said again, you can take advantage of pandas and then just run columns here, is it? And then you have a sense of the different sort of attributes that you have here, right? But what's interesting for us is would now be interested at this point to start doing things like exploring the data set, for instance, right? Or generating graphs if you want, doing your exploratory data analysis operations, if you will, or perhaps doing some sanity check. We realize that there are an array of functions, right? Operations that we can perform. Like, for instance, we can take a peek at the first couple of observations or records in our data set. By default, it shows you like 5, right? Yeah, you can specify that you want to look at what's at the tail end at the bottom, so the last 5 records if you want. Or if you want, you can overload this thing and just feed it how many number of records you want to see. So I just want to see the first 2 records or something. It's quite useful really, because sometimes, like in this particular case, 69 rows, you can't see everything, right? You can then start extracting specific attributes that you want. Or alternatively, this is my personal favorite, what you can do is you can transpose this, right? So it's say, I just want to look at 1 record, but what I want to do is I want to transpose this so that at least I have a different sort of view or something like that. Now, in terms of filtering, we said that if we know the structure, right? If we know the structure of our data frame, what we can then start doing by way of filtering is identify the field on which we want to do our select or our filtering. The obvious one here would be, if we look at the head here, would be, and I know this data set because I created it, so I'd say the obvious one would be, I'm trying to see here. I say minor, right? Or campus accommodation. I think I used campus accommodation in my example in class, if you remember. So I said, in terms of campus accommodation, for us to gain a sense of what sort of values are held by this, we get that slice, the series, and we see that it's a yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. These are binary values. So if this is the case, we can specify to say we are interested in just seeing entries or records that have the value yes, right? So we are creating a condition. And when we create a condition, what you notice is that the result we are getting are Boolean values, true or false. And because these are Boolean values, true or false, we can then filter on our data frame, right? So we'll go back to our data frame. I don't want to waste time here. We use this as a condition, right? In our data frame. And what we've done now is, instead of our 273 observations, we are now selecting the 93 that are associated with students that have accommodation, or students that are accommodated or something. Now, the question I was asking you is, and I think this was homework, right? I was saying, well, what if in an instance where we want to use multiple conditions, right? Where the usual and or something or not, right? Bitwise operators. I said, in Python pandas, what you're interested in doing when you're applying this sort of condition is you're doing a row-wise comparison. You want to compare things row by row. And so what you do is you have got to make sure that you use these operators, and or. If you use the actual, and or, it won't work. You understand? So in this particular case, let's say, again, going back to our structure here, maybe we want to check, I'm trying to see here. How about final exam? That's a good one. Let's look at what we have for final examination. And we want to see, out of the 273 observations, how many of these observations passed, right? Right? If you notice, how many of them passed? This condition, right, is showing us, if you look at the results here, it's like the the observation at index 0 here passed. Observation at index 1 passed, right? Index 3, well, index 0 passed, index 1 passed, index 3, 0, 1, index 2 failed, right? Because it's a false or something. For us to get the actual records, what do? We do the same thing we're doing here. And we see that these are the students who actually passed, right? Got, I don't know if it's supposed to be greater or equal to here, like that. If this is making sense, I don't know, right? Now the question here is, how do we combine this? It's saying, for us to combine this condition with what we had earlier, we have got to use a bitwise operator, right? This is what we're expecting you to tell us. Boom. Right, so we have 55. Is this fine? Okay. Anyway, so I thought today, I don't know how this is going to work here, but I thought I would just walk us through the notebook just to try and explain some of the things that you've already seen. So in the notebook, you notice that at the very beginning, we just have some sort of explanation as to why this is the case, showcasing exactly how you install Pandas. In essence, helping you understand some of the things that we were discussing. You can ignore the very first bit of the notebook, because what I'm doing is I'm not actually referring to either one of the three data sets, right? But I'm just constructing I'm constructing a data frame using using a list, if you notice here. Just log in here. This is one of the reasons why I don't like using Google Golab here, but again, if I start using my local setup, it's going to be a bit confusing, right? Because I'm referring to different sort of things here. I'm just showcasing exactly how you create a series from one of the native Pythonic data structures, like a list or something, right? Which is straightforward here. And then there's a section here that speaks to the different ways in which we can read data. We're showcasing an example where you can read information from an HTML page. The interesting thing about the read HTML is that, if you remember, this only works for pages that have a table. If the page from where you're reading information from doesn't have a tabular structure, you get an error or something. And I think I showcased that when we were attempting to read data from the UNZA homepage, right? It only worked for Wikipedia. And if you remember, when we were extracting information from Wikipedia, we could see the typical structure of your Wikipedia page. So what you're seeing when you're reading Wikipedia actually is this information here. Your info box to the right? Any other important information that you're seeing these things here. What perhaps may be useful when you're going through this notebook, what may be useful for you is to check the resulting data structure, right? If I were to check the type of this thing here, I'm just going to create a new cell. What you notice is that in as much as the pd.read family of functions are meant to create a Pandas data frame, there are certain instances, like in this particular case, where the result is a list. You understand? So these things you're seeing here, they are items within a list. However, there are likely some items within this list that are obviously data frames. Right? So what you would have to do if you, for instance, find yourself analyzing Wikipedia, is you probably want to check how many items do you have in a list. It's like there are 24 things that have been extracted from the Zambia Wikipedia page. And then out of these 24, you can then, kind of like start inspecting these things one at a time, right? And see what is at index 0, for instance. right? I don't know what is there. I mean, you can check the type and try and see. This looks like a data frame, actually. So what I have on index 0, and you can probably try and shoot in the dark and figure out what this is, but this looks like an info box, right? Notice we have information about who the president is, the speaker, and all those things, and this is clearly a data frame. So index 0, the item which is at index 0 is actually a Pandas data frame, right? I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, so I guess we're just trying to showcase the fact that in some instances where you're reading data from an HTML page, the immediate result may not necessarily be a Pandas data frame. That's a key takeaway point here. And then interestingly enough, what we discovered was that one of the other more widely used read functions is a read Excel. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're working on a problem, you're working with a client that predominantly generates or uses Excel files to generate data, then you'd want to use your read Excel function. I know what you're thinking. Well, but Lighton, we can probably get the the Excel document and we get the Excel document and then we do a save as and then we specify that the file that we want to do a save as is a CSV file. Well, but it's a bit cumbersome, right? Sometimes you find yourself working with these data sets that have multiple sheets within a workbook. So what perhaps would be helpful for you is to use the read Excel function. I've interacted with colleagues from ZRA, for instance, that work with Excel data, right? A lot of Excel data here. So there you go. Anyway, so what I've done in here, and in the interest of time, we don't have to waste a lot of time here, but in this notebook, example 2 to be specific, I showcase exactly how you do this. I make mention of the fact that there's actually a package, right? A library that you have got to install for this to work. So all you have to do is just play around with this and try and see if you can convert one of the CSV files I've provided into an Excel document, right? And see if you can actually start reading the data and play around with the functions in that. Okay? And then probably one of the most widely used formats you will find yourself using Pandas with is JSON, right? JSON is everywhere. In most instances, it's rarely the case that you'll be working with CSV files, but what you will find yourself doing is you're extracting information from some API endpoint or something, right? And then you're analyzing that information. The obvious thing for people to do is you would say, I'm going to get the output from the API endpoint, if it's in maybe XML or something, or JSON, and then convert it into CSV. But that's time consuming, right? What you'd much rather do is you take advantage of the pandas.readJSON function. Quite useful. I gave an example of Lusaka Times, right? If you look at the structure, of a JSON file spooled from the Lusaka Times API endpoint. So there's an endpoint that allows you to extract posts. The idea behind this is simple, by the way, for those that may not be familiar with this. So that example is getting the information that you see when you go here. Now, this Lusaka Times has been, I think, in existence for probably almost a decade, if not more, right? So they have a lot of posts. Now, think of a situation where you're wanting to analyze the things from here, right? What you do, we said, is you can take advantage of the fact that WordPress, because this thing is powered by WordPress, WordPress has a RESTful API. It allows you to extract information in JSON format. Now, if you look at the structure of this, right, a single post has a lot of information associated with it. So if you are analyzing information coming from this API endpoint, you'd have to figure out a very smart way of programmatically pulling this information. I know you'd say, well, I can easily implement a function that just loops through this and checks for these. It checks for these. This is a dictionary. You can view this as a dictionary. It checks for these values here, right? I'm looking at what the ID is. But it turns out that in Pandas, what you can do is you just take advantage of the read JSON function, and it does everything for you in the background. And what I did actually in the example, if you remember, is I said There's a caveat, by the way. You run into errors if you try and read this direct from the URL, right? You'd have to play around with this somehow. So what would be probably easier for you to do is you probably want to get this. You just want to extract this, put it into an external JSON file or something, and then you'd read this thing here, right? It's a JSON file. So what we said we do is, again, what we do is we just import Python pandas. Notice I'm doing a number of imports because these files are located in different places, is it? Import your Python pandas, and you create a variable that's going to hold this. But in this particular case, we're using the read JSON. And all you do is you feed it the JSON file, and the magic happens, right? So this thing has ingested the JSON file on my behalf. It's figured out the pattern associated with the different, attributes, right? Associated with the JSON file itself. So if I check, if I use the built-in function len, for instance, thing is going to tell me how many records I have. So it's about 100 posts from Lusaka Times. And it turns out by default, when you're using this RESTful API, well, by default, actually, it spits out five posts, if not 10 posts or something. But you can pass it other parameters so that you pick. Like in this particular case, I'm picking 100. If I wanted to harvest everything that has been published by Lusaka Times here, I would have to start picking 100 posts per page, right? So page 100, page 200, until I get to the very end where there are no more posts to read, right? And I do my analysis or something. But in this particular case, I'm putting 100, I check the len, I also check the type, right? And I see that the read JSON, or read under by JSON function, converts this thing into a pandas data frame. And because it's a pandas data frame, we can do the same things we've been doing with the read under by CSV, right? Like we can check what sort of columns we have here. Yeah? We can check the shape. Everything is the same in life, is it? 100 observations, 29 columns, right? And then you can start doing your analysis. Now, it's not my job here to tell you how to analyze the data. It's the job of the person for whom you are maybe building this solution for, right? They say, we want you to, for years now, I've been telling some of the students when I use this as an example, you can build a very nice application that, a mobile application that harvests information not just from Lusaka Times, but from the Zambian Watchdog blog, right? It runs WordPress. From Web1 to it runs WordPress. In fact, you can even use Graph API, Facebook's Graph API, to pull these things from Facebook. And you build this really nice application that enables somebody like me to just use an Android application to gain access to the most recent news items per day, right? Rather than me going to all of these different things here, something like that. Anyways, what else can we do here? We can do the usual. We can inspect the information. You notice inspecting the information is the same, but in some instances, depending on the structure of the data that you're working with, functions like head, for instance, will not really be useful in any way, right? I mean, look at the output here. You'll be sitting there and you're wondering, what is this, right? But maybe what may be helpful for you is just to look at one record and perhaps transpose it again, right? And then there we go, you have some useful information. In this way, you actually be able to figure out smarter ways of analyzing this information. Yes?
So,
No. So I've done a couple of things here, right? You notice? Thank you. Questions will normally give us an idea of whether people are following or not. And I think my method is working here. But notice what we're doing, right? We first of all import pandas. After we import pandas, what we are doing is we are creating a variable, Lusaka Times. So var Lusaka Times is a variable that's holding this data structure. And this data structure is nothing more than the data that we are reading from the JSON file. Yeah. Is it legal? Well, so this is interesting because, and in fact, it's one of the reasons why we going to have a discussion centered around ethics, is it? If you've noticed the course outline. The question you should be asking yourself is, you know that these LLMs we're using, if you ask it questions about people in Zambia, it pulls information from places like Lusaka Times, right? You should be asking yourself a question: did they get permission from Lusaka Times or something to do this? So my response to you is, this is a publicly available information. The API is open to the public. It's different from Facebook. You know that for you to get access to information on Facebook via Graph API, you have got to apply to gain access to that, right? You register your application and all those things. But this is publicly available information. So I would argue that it's legal. Unless if these guys had an explicit copyright statement on their website. But it's hardly the case on most websites in Zambia, actually. You rarely find people explicitly indicate that we're using a Creative Commons license or something. So I'd say, yes, it's legal. Nobody would actually sue you, right? This is publicly available information. Now, in case of Facebook here, because we are learning, if I was to use an example of the Facebook Graph API, I wouldn't really use Graph API, but I'll take advantage of a slew of Python packages. I don't know if some of you guys have used these packages that will actually scrape information from Facebook. So if you are scraping information from, let's say, the Zambian Watchdog page, you can do that because the page is open to the public. And because it's open to the public, you don't necessarily have to log in for you to access that information. You understand? And because you don't necessarily have to log in for you to access that information, you can actually scrape it. But you wouldn't necessarily be able to easily extract that information using Graph API. You know? You know what I'm trying to say here? Is this making sense? Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so JSON, right? Easy enough. Now, the thing is, what you notice is it doesn't matter whether you are using, you're reading data from a JSON file, whether it's a CSV file, whether it's Excel, and guess what? Whether you are reading data from an SQL database. And I don't know how many of you have done this. I went through a bit of, it took a bit of effort here, but I decided to showcase an example where you can actually read, or you can read data from a database and then ingest it into a Pandas data frame. And this is, if you go out there in industry, what you begin to notice is that this is probably one of the most common use cases. Most organizations will store information not in CSV files or in Excel files, right? They will have this information in a database. So rather than you have some database administrator or something like a business analyst run queries and extract that information, you can dynamically read that information from a database. This is the whole point of this example number 4. I know it's a trivial example, and I think I use SQLite. So what I'm essentially doing in the background, in case people care here, is that so I'm using the CSV file to create an SQLite database, right? This is the DB file, and then we are querying the database itself. Because you have a database, you can actually query it in a number of different ways, right? One of the interesting ways in which you can query this database is you can specify an SQL query. You understand? So this is why we have this example here. Please go through it at your own time and try and see if you can actually play around with it by specifying different types of queries. Like in this particular case, the query that we are using is just enabling us to extract the gender, the student name, and the exam score, right? If we wanted, what we could do is we could select everything, is it? From here, and it would still work, right? So we are selecting, and maybe this will make a lot of sense, I guess, if I don't know if we can do this here. You've forgotten your databases, you guys, right? I don't know what's... You've forgotten your databases? You have or you haven't? So to showcase what we're doing here, in case you're wondering what sort of structure we're working with, it's a simple database, quite all right. So we can do this, I guess. And the structure is simple, is it, in our database? We only have one table. And this is the structure of the table. So if you have this database, if you're thinking of playing around with this database, this is what you're working with. And so if you're working with this, you can, I'm saying that you can do, usually when you're working with your RDBMS here, it's like you can, and I have to do the tables here. You can do this, right? This is what we're doing, but we're doing this from within Pandas. And in fact, I don't know if this is fine actually. We can do the usual things here, like this. In fact, do this. So what I'm trying to showcase here is that what I'm doing here can be done within Pandas, right? Depending on what sort of data you want to extract, you can just write these SQL queries and then you analyze your data afterwards. What other interesting things are there? Well, we see here that, so we can read an entire table. This is a simplified example of how you are reading data from a database using Python Pandas. In a real world scenario, you would have a database that has probably like hundreds of tables, not one table, right? When you have a student table. What we are saying is you can even read data from one of the tables. You understand? If that makes sense. All right, and then we have the usual read CSV here. So this is very straightforward stuff. The other things that you have here are just basic exploration examples. So how you go about using your head command, your tail command, how you use things like the info command or the info function, how you get to extract statistical information about the data frame itself, right? So especially in the case where we are working with, what is this? Numeric data, right? Quiz 1 all the way up to 20, test 1 all the way up to test 4, and the final exam. These are all numeric data, continuous. These are continuous attributes, and because they're continuous attributes, these are the sort of attributes where you would want to run these statistical functions like your mean, your mode, your standard deviation. Python Pandas, we were saying, has a very interesting function that allows you to run, right, the describe command and be able to extract that interesting information in just one single command, right? This thing here. Yeah. So for each field, I'm getting like the count, the mean, the standard deviation, the minimum value, and really what you begin to notice is that for some of these attributes, like if I look at academic year, for instance, I wouldn't want to get the mean of academic year because in as much as Python, Pandas is dumb here and it thinks it's a numeric value, we wouldn't want to perform any arithmetic or mathematical operations on this. It's pointless. However, we may want to perform these operations here on exam scores, for instance, right? So if I scroll down and go to maybe the quizzes and the test results, it makes sense that we look at these values here. Do you guys understand this? And then you have examples on how you filter rows. I know this is trivial stuff, but we put it there just so you're able to understand this. And perhaps something that will come up often is how you actually perform an operation on an entire series. Now, very, very soon, I think it's in lecture series number 3 or number 4 or something, when we start looking at preprocessing, you do things like, on all observations, I want to remove stop words. I want to apply stemming, for instance. The question is, how do you do that? Well, we define a function, right? A function that's going to allow you to remove all stop words, to apply stemming, to remove punctuations, and you use the apply command. So you define your function, and then on that particular series, right, the slice of the data frame, you do a dot apply. This is the part where I said in here, if let's say we wanted to do this. This is a simple example here. We wanted to get the student names, and for some weird reason, you decide to say, well, we want these student names to be in all uppercase or something. What you would do is you'd say, I'm going to define a function called up or something that takes in a variable name or something like that. And then I'll just say return what did they say in Python? What function do we, how do we return the what do you call this, all uppercase representation of the name? Yeah, I don't know, right? So we're trying to do this, is it? We're trying to do this. So the point being, if I wanted to convert all of these things here into uppercase, what I'll then do is I use the apply function, right? And then I feed it this helper function that I've created. And it's going to convert everything into OLAP. Very, very useful, right? Otherwise, you probably come up with a brute force implementation where you say, well, I am going to extract all the items in my, this is what you would do, right? I know you. I'm going to extract everything in here, and then I will convert it to, I'll convert it to a list because I know how to work with lists, right? And then I'll start for each, for name, right? In list, right? I'm going to say var name dot up or something. This is retarded, but this is what you probably would do. Okay, I think there's a class coming in. Yes. What we have done so far, as far as I'm concerned, is we have learned how to use Python Pandas. Yes. We know how to use Python Pandas. If we were to ask a question on and about Python Pandas in the exam, in the test, we expect you to use that, yes. And we have shown you how to do this by reading data from a comma-separated value file, from a database, from a JSON file, from an Excel file. Any questions? Okay, if there are no questions, I'll see you tomorrow. I think we have class at, can I have my register, please? My signed register. I think we have class at 18 hours or something. Thank you. Hi, I thought you were going to come with my register. Where's my register? Hi, I'm well, thanks. How are you? Are you managing with Python Pandas? Have you gone through the notebook? No. Sorry? Yeah. There's like 2 notebooks so far, right? And I know, you know how I know? When I go to Mood and check the logs, there's like I think less than 10% people looking at those materials. And you're going to fall behind here, right? What? The projector? Yes, you have to. Sorry. It's a thankless job, is it? Yeah. So, so you're saying what is difficult about what we're looking at? I knew if we are going to go to Matplotlib today, people are going to be lost, which is why I was doing this recap, because you people don't want to do this, right? I told you to go and go through the notebooks. What aspect of what we looked at is a challenge? There's a class, we can go outside. Can I ask whoever has the register, can they give it to Ebenezer or Mpuka or Swilanj or something? Yeah.
So, I didn't sign in the first register.
Yeah, no, you were not here then.
No, I was there.
You're going to lose 0.001 or something.
No, sir, I was here.
But where is the proof?
You even said last time that, you even asked.
Yeah.
yes, that has everyone signed in the register, then we say no.
Okay, do you want to send me an email about it and then I'll mark you as having attended? Thanks. I think this is better, is it? Yeah, so what is the problem exactly?
Like, I don't really understand what this is all about. Like, I understood the fact that you said it can be used like to collect data. Like,
I'm surprised that fourth years would be like blank about what we're doing, right? This is very worrying here. Do you know why we are doing this? We are doing this part of the lecture series. Did you attend the first class? We said that when we start going through the methodological approach for analyzing data, we're going to be running these commands, right? Like when we start looking at preprocessing, you will see me reading data from a CSV file. You will see me, implementing custom functions. And so we were doing this to make sure that people don't get lost when we get to that stage. In fact, we're doing this because it's part of the syllabus. It's mention of Python and stuff, right? But specifically, what we are doing here, thanks very much. Specifically, what we are doing in this particular notebook for Python Pandas is we are trying to teach you how you would analyze and manipulate data, large-scale data, right? Python is one of those efficient and effective libraries that is ideal for doing this. So that's why we're doing this. And so this notebook outlines exactly how you read or how you actually install this library for you to use it. It will show you exactly how you take advantage of Python Pandas to actually extract specific information from a data frame like a series, right? How to filter information. That's what we are doing in here. So I don't know why you are.
so basically, we're just learning how to use Jupyter.
No, this is, we were learning how to use Jupyter Notebook in the very first one. This is, the Jupyter Notebook thing was here. Was the very first notebook. So if you go in here, this is a notebook that was showing you how you get started with the Jupyter Notebook. In the second notebook, we are looking at how to use Python Pandas. Tell you what, if you have not yet gone through the notebook number 2, play it back, right? I've designed this in such a way that if you just open it up in Chrome, you will run these commands yourself. So what you want to do is, of course, you have to make some few changes. There are portions of this notebook like, I think I tag it as, I think I tag it as notes for students or something like that. Should be here. You want to make sure that before you play this back, especially before this cell, you change this to point it to where you're going to store these data sets on your drive. And then everything else will happen. That's it. And I'm sure you'll be fine. If you're still stuck, you can let me know. We have class tomorrow. Yeah. Yes. But at fourth year, I don't think you will struggle that much. You'll be just fine. Thank you very much.